Welcome to the June 15th Storage Provider Meetup. This one, very timely. Last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago in the previous call, that was Incentives Day, and we announced that there was a 2-week extension on the basic to full sale that was running, and that means kicking it 2 weeks down the road. That puts us back to today, where this is the last day for the basic to full upgrade. The remit that is involved with that must be done by midnight. I believe that there's a process within the software that it will, once the clock strikes 12, it will automatically send through that remit. And if there aren't enough funds in the wallet to cover that, then you get put on a naughty list where we'll probably have to email you, and we'll resolve that. But to avoid any issues, if you haven't done the remit yet, go ahead and do that. And if you haven't upgraded, then this is kind of the very last twinkle of the best opportunity there probably ever will be to upgrade. So get on that, or think about it, or do whatever you need to do to convince yourself that this is probably the the best opportunity you're going to get to jump on board and not miss out on all those special features and incentives and everything that comes with being a full. I think we treat them pretty well. Fulls are Ohana, their family, and we would like all of you to be one. Anyway, moving forward, today wanted to spend a bit of time also talking about some of the storage provider kind of setups or things that are going on. So we spend a lot of time on these storage provider calls talking about kind of relayers and the partner program and what's going on there. And I guess I always just kind of assumed that it was pretty obvious to the audience what the significance of that was. And that kind of an understanding that the better state the relayers are in and the more people are using them, the better that is for you as a storage provider. But I think I'm going to try and use a little bit of a different angle today. So a discussion that's been being had over the last couple of weeks with the partners and all the partner side of things, we're getting really deep into the specifics of what it looks like for the partners to set up storage providers of their own and create storage provider sets. So I think that probably warrants a new discussion from the storage provider's kind of perspective or angle on what that means for you guys. So I think we've been consistent all along that the people that will become the biggest winners from this new type of network, this type of kind of decentralized contract-based storage that we offer, the biggest winners will be those who see the value and understand the mechanics, and those who work both sides of it. The meaning of that being those who become partners and provide storage, but also kind of take on some kind of MSP or CSP duty to bring on storage to the network and put some of that storage that they're bringing onto the network onto their own storage providers. So they're kind of working both sides of it. We've long felt that the people that will benefit most from this kind of network will be people that recognize the ability to do that and have the ability to do that, and then actually do that. Because, some people seem to struggle with that last bit of actually, they understand the theory just fine, but then actually doing it. But I think we're pretty happy with the current wave of interest and partners that we have right now. So the significance of that is mostly that those people will benefit the most, but that is also probably the highest bar for involvement in the project. It does mean a lot of active work in the sense that you're going out and kind of bringing data to the network. You're selling people and pitching people a bit. I'm convinced, and I think a lot of people are convinced that work will pay dividends, and not just in the immediate future, but in the long future, because much of this is, I think we kind of word it often as subscription-based data, almost, in the sense that for the most part with cloud storage, once it's on the network, in most cases it stays there for a while, sometimes a very long while, like indefinitely. So if you can capture that data when it's uploaded, that's paying you for potentially years to come. And there isn't a lot more work once you need to do to keep that data, or once that data is captured and it's on your hard drive and you are the storage provider or one of the storage providers for that file, you've kind of done the hard work already. So the people that will benefit most will be those who put in the most and go out there and work the street and benefit from both sides of it. But where I'm going with this, and why I intended to bring this up on this call, is the people that will benefit maybe second most. I mean, not to make this like a contest, but the people that will still benefit strongly, but maybe not quite as much, are the people who understand this and see this and are ready for it. So what does that mean? What does being ready as a storage provider mean? I have a couple, I posed myself that question actually, and I came up with a couple answers. This is by no means definitive, and I would invite the community maybe to give some thought to that as well. But to me, being ready as a storage provider for the coming wave of data and interest and partners bringing data to the network, that means kind of having your house in order. So it means that your storage provider is not like, I don't know, I still have this mental image of like Raspberry Pis that are barely holding it together with like running off a USB wall brick or something. It basically means that your storage provider, everything that is within your control, it's in a good state. It's well figured out. You have a plan with the metadata and the backups and all of that. So everything that is within your control in regards to your storage provider is in a good state. That's probably the most important thing to have. It also means having a plan to grow and scale your storage provider. So one of the advantages to going that full license kind of DIY route is that it lets you, but it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of what your storage provider setup can look like. And one of the advantages of that is that you can add storage space with time. So you've maybe have 1 or 2 hard drives dedicated today. Having that full license means that you can potentially add storage as needs arrive in the future. So having a kind of plan for what that would look like, internal drives versus external drives, there isn't a lot of if we started looking at specific setups, I could probably be more helpful when it comes to suggesting what seems like a good approach and maybe what doesn't. But since storage provider setups on the DIY side vary so much, then it's hard to give a lot of specific advice. But I'd say in general, it does seem like Linux kind of wins against Windows for the most part. Linux providers run into fewer issues. It's easier to scale up the file system. There's just a lot of, at the end of the day, a storage provider kind of is a mini server, and Linux is much better suited than Windows is to running server style processes. So encourage you to kind of dabble or experiment or get your toes wet with Linux if you haven't already. But yeah, start thinking about what it would look like if you wake up 6 months from now or 12 months from now, and you kind of think to yourself, my hard drive's like 2/3 or 3/4 full. I should probably start thinking about adding another one or adding more space. But the issue with kind of dealing with that only once it comes up is that then there isn't always a lot of forethought put into it. You're only kind of taking things on one step at a time. And it can definitely pay dividends to be thinking about at this point now. Now that there isn't an urgent need, at least like you probably have a bit of time to actually potentially implement a solution that you identify. You have a bit of time to get mucky with Linux if that is a path that is probably best for you. Then just start thinking about what it would look like to double or triple the space on your storage provider. What it would take, both hardware and software. What skills you might need to develop personally. Like what if you don't really even know how to scale up, then start thinking about what do I need skill wise. That's again, I encourage people to don't be too scared of Linux. It's a good way to learn it is kind of a hobby project, probably not one where money's on the line. So I maybe wouldn't jump straight to setting your main storage provider up, but I don't know, find a little hobby project. Learning Linux, I promise it's not as difficult or not as intimidating as it may seem. But to that end, we are at this point on the team, myself anyway, we are having conversations about what does it look like to invest in the community's Linux skills and Linux chops, and we're looking at what courseware is out there, what courseware we could build as kind of a SC Prime or Exonet Services branded. Like, what do you need to know about Linux, and how does it pertain to running a storage provider, running a relayer, kind of having a couple hour long skill course that we would give to the community and encourage you guys to look at. Something like that. That's what we're looking at this point. But yeah, having a couple years of experience now monitoring like thousands of storage providers across different setups and platforms and what different issues they run into, it is kind of apparent that at the end of the day, Linux does kind of win against Windows. That's just, it is what it is. We try to support Windows as best as we can, but there are just some limitations of the platform. So that's life. Anyway, being more specific with what kind of tools might be helpful, having your storage provider be ready also means having tools like Uptime Robot. It means having troubleshooting chops. So that means knowing where to find our docs and our resources. So we actually just a couple weeks ago moved from like docs.examiner.net, like that style of URL. We moved to now natively integrating to the site the docs. Because you may have noticed, I'm sure if you ever looked at our docs on our main site properties, when you visited the docs section, it kind of took you to like another site. And that's because we were using a service called Gitbook to deliver those docs. We now have them natively integrated to our site, which is, it flows nicer and it's better. But I think there are maybe some people that are still looking in the wrong place for those docs. So just wanted to get the word out there again that now, yeah, if you just head straight to examiner.net or scpry.me or xns.tech, any of our kind of three main properties, depending on what you're looking for, you'll find the docs now directly through there, kind of either along the top headings or under one of the subheadings. I'm sure you can find them if you look. It's not like we try to make them in the first place you would look for them when you visit those sites. But anyway, so get familiar with those, bookmark them or save them, or at least, there's like 80 different ways you can find them. Like they're linked all over the Discord, like the frequently asked questions channel, the social media, and or like the links channel. Yeah, they're there if you look for them. The important step is to look for them. But yeah, kind of invest in your troubleshooting chops, familiarize yourself with what different docs pages even are there. Because I think a lot of people, it's only when things start going wrong that they start even really looking at what resources are out there. And then sometimes when, things are pretty hairy and tensions are high, you're not always ultimately looking in the right place or not thinking very clearly, or you're pretty pressed for time. And I don't know, there's all sorts of contributing factors. But yeah, I definitely encourage people to set up Uptime Robot, familiarize yourself with our docs, invest in your troubleshooting abilities before things go wrong. And you're going to be very thankful for that if/when things do go wrong, because then you'll have a plan and you'll be calm. You'll know where to look. Well, you'll know because of Uptime Robot, you'll know right away when things go wrong, and that's half the battle. Sometimes people show up after like a week, only just realizing that their Grafana says that they're offline. And then they're not very happy. Then we're not very happy because their provider's been offline for a week, and it's just everybody loses. So set up Uptime Robot. You'll know straight away the moment anything may be up, and then you'll have most amount of time possible to kind of start troubleshooting it, looking into it. You'll have the resources available because you followed what I was asking you to do here and looked. And then you'll be good to go, and we'll all be happy. And finally, the last thing that comes to mind when I think of what can a storage provider do to be ready for these coming developments is thinking of ways to get in on kind of provider sets. So I initially led all this with how providers that are partners that kind of work both sides, the renter side and the storage provider host side, that they are going to, I guess, kind of win the most. But that doesn't necessarily look like just one monolithic thing. There's a lot of ways that you can, I guess, kind of work both sides. One of them could be, well, the most obvious one is to just have a very good, stable storage provider That doesn't necessarily just mean, I mean, it mostly means, but it doesn't just mean having very high uptime and very good reliability. One thing that we or someone could look for in a storage provider is that when things do go wrong, how quickly does it take them to get back online? So if somebody has like 100% uptime, but that's only because nothing's ever gone wrong, how do you know that if things do eventually go wrong for that storage provider, like they get knocked offline for a couple hours, how do you know that they're going to be able to come back from that? Whereas maybe if there's somebody else, just hypothetically here, just if there's somebody else with like 99.99 whatever percent uptime, but there were like one or two times over the last year where they went down for a couple hours, but they demonstrated that they could fix whatever problem was causing that and get back online. I know personally I would probably feel a little bit better with the second person, because at least you have that peace of mind of, they've been tested a little bit. So anyway, there's all sorts of things that partners and people that are uploading data to the network could be looking at. The most important one is just kind of taking care of your house, like I said in my first point, making sure that your storage provider is as set up and happy and situated and figured out as possible, with a plan for the future, with a plan for if things go wrong, with an ability to scale, all of that. But what it can also mean is thinking of ways that in your daily life, or through various people that you know, different things that you see, either through work or whatever, different ways that you can think of cloud storage being used. And if you can perhaps refer or serve as an affiliate, or like if there's some way that you can bring some data to the network, probably the person that is ultimately onboarding that data might be more than happy to include you as a storage provider in one of those upload sets. So that means that you get slightly preferred as a storage provider. You might get a little bit more of that data than someone else on the network would, which directly benefits you, acts as kind of like a native direct kickback, which is cool. But yeah, I think this is going to be a discussion point that's going to evolve quite a bit over the next couple months as host sets become like fully implemented in the console and in the relayer, as we start to see providers, as we start to see partners directly implement these different sets, and we get to kind of see what different factors they prioritize, different ways that they pick their providers for their sets. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very dynamic, that's for sure. There's going to be kind of a tech side of it. There's going to be a business side of it. It's going to be very interesting. And I think there's a lot of room for everyone to benefit. So yeah, I think if you are a storage provider, yeah, there's a couple things there to kind of chew on and think about in order to have your storage provider be as best situated as possible to take advantage of the different things that are going to be coming to the network. Now, I also have here, I'm going to start a screen share. Hope everybody can see it. And what this is a little bit of a preview from an interview that I conducted about a week ago with one of our partners. So his name is Donald. Great guy. Really looking forward to you guys being able to see the full interview. Working on getting that out. But this is going to be just a little bit of a preview of my interview with him. And I hope you all can listen in. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear it okay. But I'm just going to shut up and play a little segment of it. I think this segment that I'm previewing is just one or two questions from it. Let's go ahead. And it's true that a number of regions in the world are kind of underserved by traditional cloud. So it seems like you experimented with some setups where you were coming up with configs that were ultimately backing up to the cloud. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you tell me how the relayer helps return control over kind of regional cloud, and perhaps in some parts of the world, like you mentioned, one of your customers is in the Caribbean. Is that a serious factor of proximity to traditional data centers?
Well, I mean, most of the centralized storages that are out there, they have a specific regions you might go to, either U.S., Europe, or wherever. Whereas, I mean, to me, what I was doing is that if there wasn't a storage provider in that country, for instance, in the Caribbean where we would set up, I would just drop a storage provider there that, and part of the data would go local to that region. So it wouldn't be where they'd be going back to data have to go, way back to somewhere in the US or Canada or Europe. And you can do that. You can replicate that anywhere in the world where, your internet might be more of a challenge in certain areas of the world, and you can just put your storage provider. The relayer can point it. Some of the data can point it to the local storage provider, and it's to me it just makes sense. And not only that, one of the things that if the customer wants to save some funds or money on the storage solution, they can set up a relayer. Sorry, set up a storage provider with the relayer. So
Yeah.
it's just there's a lot of ways to configure this to minimize the cost and also to make it more efficient.
Really happy actually you brought that up, because there has been a lot of discussion lately on how people can work kind of both sides of it, and how storing on your own providers almost serves like a native kickback almost. Like it just
Yeah,
kind of makes sense to do, especially if you're. It makes sense if you're a storage provider that, hey, if I'm offering all this space, why don't I use some of it? And it makes sense if you're using a relayer. If I'm sending off all this space, why don't I return some of it back to me? It kind of works from both sides. So
right. So it's huge. It's huge. To me, this is, it's anyone, to me, I would think that most businesses, they would see this as it just makes sense. Once you understand how the technology works, the background of that, when you send your data over to the relayer can drop the data in any storage provider, based on your choices, and that could include your own. And your storage provider has the same kind of security, same kind of redundancy and all that as any other one. So take on some of that, and then get paid for some of it yourself. So it just makes sense. I don't, this to me is the first project that allows me to do stuff like that. I don't see any other project where I could not only use the service but also provide service and make money at the same time. I don't know. It's a great solution overall.
So that was yeah, part of a great discussion that I'm looking forward to putting out for everyone to see. I think that kind of emphasized or kind of reiterated a lot of the points that I kind of touched on. The partners are very excited for the ability of kind of what's to come. And it was also just great in general to hear from him, someone that has been using our network for a couple months, has experience with pretty much every side of things, to be saying those things and pointing out that we are kind of the only network in existence in the whole space that allows people to do the kinds of things that we allow them to do. And that was really validating to hear. So it was great talking to Donald, and I'll let all of you know. Well, yeah, probably by the time we have the next storage provider meetup, that link will be out there for you guys to watch the full interview. Now, speaking towards some of what's going on in the community, I think on the last call I touched on the BagBuilder competition that's going on, the BagBuilder contest. That is still ongoing. And not only is it ongoing, it's picked up quite a bit. I think there are now something like 30 entrants. There is just shy of 1 million SCP that have been bagged. That's really exciting. I think that I didn't really know what to expect personally when that competition launched, but that far exceeds, I think, what anybody was expecting the community to be able to kind of put together and stash away. So I'm really impressed and really excited with that. And what I think is just as awesome is that there are 5 individuals that have bagged 100,000 SCP or more. So that's really exciting to see. Just want to reiterate that this is a community-led contest. I'm just kind of observing it and reporting from what I see as an outsider to it. But yeah, really cool stuff to see. It's always awesome to see the community kind of put together some engagement or some contests that are self-run, and see them run pretty successfully and achieve their goals. What's also going on in the community, so Gold Shell, hopefully you remember them from the last couple meetups that we've done. Gold Shell Miner on Twitter. That's their account, Gold Shell Miner. They are giving away 5 HS boxes, I believe. I think they're celebrating the fact that they've been on Twitter for 4 years, something like that. That seems like a little bit of a silly thing to be doing a big giveaway and celebration for, but I'm not going to complain. And I encourage all of you to head over to Gold Shell Miner's Twitter page and enter that contest because they're giving away 5 HS boxes. And I think I also saw one special secret prize. I genuinely have no idea what that special secret prize is. They don't tell me these things, but I'll be keeping an eye out to see what it is. I think that's pretty neat. And yeah, lots of giveaways. We did a giveaway last month. It sounds like there's Gold Shell's doing another giveaway this month. Lots of ways to win different consensus miners. So pretty cool. Also wanted to touch on the SCP Funkles. We've mentioned them, I think, in storage provider meetups going back a couple months. They're still going with their show on Sunday. I think it's noon Eastern time. They have told me that they have an exciting big announcement coming this weekend's show. They also don't tell me what these things are. Man, they don't tell me anything. I don't know what the Gold Shell Secret Prize is. I don't know what the SCP Funkle thing is. I'm in the dark just like you guys, but we'll find out, yes, kind of noon Eastern time on Saturday when they do their show. Those guys are pretty knowledgeable. I always tune in, and I encourage you to as well, especially if you like, well, if you're listening to this call, you probably like getting your news and discussion in this kind of format. And they have a similar thing going on over there too. So once again, that's a community-led effort, but those are good guys. And yeah, looking forward to see what show they have for us on Saturday. Other than that, kind of the main thing I have on my in my notes for the rest of the show is just some kind of general observations and discussion, pretty open-ended discussion, but about what's been going on in the market for the last couple of weeks. Fortunately, we have the benefit of being a utility token and a utility-focused network, so we're a bit insulated from all of some of what's been going on in the crypto market, some of the fear and uncertainty there. But I just figured it would probably be a good thing to touch on it anyway. So yeah, it's no secret that in the kind of crypto market, blockchain sphere, all of that, what a lot of people have been seeing and discussing and kind of the talk of the town for the last couple of weeks has been some of the action that's been taken against Binance and Coinbase and some of the securities discussion and policy that has been happening. Once again, we are kind of, I guess, just external to all of this that's going on. We're not on Binance. We're certainly not part of Binance or Coinbase or any of these. And there was no, we were not named in any of the security related token enforcement that was brought either. So we're just kind of talking about it from a perspective of this is what's going on in the space, but I think it's something to be keeping an eye on as well. A lot of people are a little uncertain about what that means for the future of blockchain and kind of crypto markets and companies in the US. We are US based. Fortunately, we're in Colorado specifically, which is fairly kind of blockchain friendly. So I think that was good foresight on our founders' part to have set up shop there. But yeah, I think although there is a lot of kind of doomerism that's going on the Twitter timeline and in the various discords and stuff, I do think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and this is a sentiment that I believe is shared with a number of people in our community as well. I think that a lot of people have correctly identified for the last couple of years that at the end of the day, something that has utility, something that's based on real world value, something that is building a service and a product and a network that real people would be willing to pay real money for, like cloud storage. That at the end of the day, that will win out. That will be kind of the last thing left standing if nothing else is. And I think, well, totally can't claim, I guess, victory to any of that or anything. I think seeing what we're seeing happen is validating to an extent. And I think a lot of people feel that what maybe will be the next thing that people look to in this space will be networks that have been focused on delivering real valued products, real services, things that can bring in sustainable revenue that are fairly low risk, like they're not financial products. Uh, I think that, yeah, a lot of people feel that there's light at the end of the tunnel in that respect, that attention will turn toward networks like ours and general favor. Yeah, that people will start feeling like, hey, maybe it's time to focus on utility and tokens and stuff. So anyway, I will open the floor to kind of not just Q&A, but any discussion that maybe people want to expand on or contribute to. If nobody has anything to say, then I am going to do that thing that I mentioned at the start of the call, where I'll just kind of melt away into the audience and let you guys discuss amongst yourselves, maybe more like a Twitter space kind of thing. Anybody that puts their hand up, I would let them up on stage and they can speak. You're also welcome to use the chat box. But yeah, if we can hang around for another 20, 30 minutes, something like that. We've got a good group in the audience here of 30 or so people. You can't tell me that none of you guys have anything to say. Come on. Patrick, come up on stage. How's it going?
It's going all right. I felt obligated to come up because you look lonely.
Thanks for taking pity.
I figured I'd just take it as an opportunity just to kind of rehash at the beginning where you were talking about Linux and just how not very scary it is. The nice thing about the internet is that there's so much information out there now that, especially for the most popular distributions of Linux, that you should be able to trip through it pretty easily, or at least find somebody that's got some kind of tangential experience with it. There's a handful of people that are even in this particular Discord that are pretty handy with it as well. That it's worth taking a look at. I know when I was very young, back before the internet, we had to use actual books to learn how to use Linux, and so it was a little bit more intimidating back then. And I think a lot of that stigma, still stems from back then. So take a whack at it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how accessible it is it is now.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on to say that. And I think going even kind of further with how good we have it now and how easy we have it now. Actually, one of our partners just kind of personally went through the experience of switching over to Linux and getting more comfortable there. And they commented that actually using ChatGPT was an enormous help. And I could certainly understand why. Because there are so many things where there's just a really specific command that you have to know to just do some specific task. And unless you know it exists, there's no way you would ever figure it out on your own. Like, it's not very intuitive, I think that's fair to say. But if you just describe a specific condition to ChatGPT or Google or anything like that, that this is what I want to do, and then just stick Linux at the end or something. Yeah, the Google and ChatGPT and Stack Overflow and all these kind of resources are pretty good at having indexed and archived. I promise you, there's almost nothing you can do on Linux where you'll be the first person to not only have done that thing, but to have asked about how to do that thing. So that's a good way to, I guess, get over the scaries a bit. And yeah, even I think that's just a fact of life of using Linux, is you have to get pretty comfortable looking things up because there's just so many really specific commands to do really minor things that are almost not worth committing to memory, but they're worth at least keeping tabs on. Oh yeah, I knew I had to do that thing once, like last year. Let me just look up probably the same phrase that I looked up last time and then see if any of the links look blue. Or purple, I guess it means if you visited. So yeah, so
Yeah,
Patrick.
No, I completely agree.
So I kind of commented that one of the probably a good way to learn Linux, or at least to get situated in it, is kind of a hobby project. I think actually in my personal case, I think setting up a storage provider was actually the first thing I did with getting introduced to Linux. And I think probably now that a lot of it is Docker based, that would actually be even easier. I think when I started, things were I was still directly using the SPD binary and everything. I think it's probably easier to. Well, there's some ways that it's harder and some ways that it's easier using Docker. I think it's a little bit more that it involves a little bit more, so it's a bit more complex in that regard. But also, once you kind of learn Docker, there's maybe only 4 or 5 commands that you regularly use with Docker, and that makes it a lot more approachable. And it's consistent across platforms. So if you already have some experience using Docker in Windows, that would mostly carry over.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Docker in and of itself is its own kind of beast that at least it translates between the different platforms pretty seamlessly. Um, we worked together for a little while now, so you've got a sense that I like figuring out how things work. I like tinkering. I like, from a hobbyist perspective. And there's the parts of Docker that I appreciate in the sense that I don't want to I just want it to work. And then there's the other side of it where I think a lot of things with regards to Linux that people refer to is having to do everything manually, and you have to flip this switch and go into this file and blah blah blah. Docker more or less simplifies a lot of that for folks. So it's it it's great if you want to learn from a real server platform, and you want to do other things beyond just storage providing. There's I'll share that when I first got into Linux, my sole objective was I wanted to run a game server, just for me and my buddies. And the platform that was most accessible in the data center was Linux. So if I wanted to do that, I had to learn Linux. And now that people's home internet is becoming faster, if you want to run your own web server at your own place, all these other microservices that are out there beyond just storage providing, there's advantages to learning it and having a nice solid platform to do it on. So, yeah, I love Linux. It's the best.
So, something I've seen that is to someone who's been in kind of the Linux side or has been doing it for long enough, they kind of forget what it's like to pick it up for the first time. How would you kind of explain, or what would you recommend to someone distribution wise? How would you explain kind of the differences between the different distributions that are out there, and which one would you recommend somebody maybe dabbles with for the first time?
That's a great question. So the best thing I could probably compare to are, I don't know. Well, I'm not a shoe guy, but shoes kind of are the best, kind of like Nike versus Reebok versus New Balance. Like at the end of the day, they're all still shoes. It's still an operating system. It's still Linux. Fundamentally, they share a core value of doing things from start to finish. So if you understand one, it's pretty easy to make the jump into another one. If you're jumping into it for the first time, the two most popular ones, hands down, are going to be Ubuntu and Debian. If you're trying to learn it from a server perspective, I probably recommend Debian out the gate, and only for the reason of that it doesn't include Snap, which if you've ever used Ubuntu, and there's a package management on Ubuntu's side that I'm not going to go into, but it's the one thing about Ubuntu that I don't like, and it's the Snap package. But on the flip side of it, and one of the things that I do recommend for folks if they're learning it for the first time and they're putting it on some hardware that they want to just experience Linux for the first time, the desktop environments now for Linux are infinitely nicer and easier to set up now than they were even 10 years ago. And Ubuntu kind of has captured that space, and even some slight other variants of Ubuntu have captured that space really well. So if you're coming from a Windows environment and you're like, hey, the CLI or the command line interfaces, okay, that's too overwhelming for me. I want a desktop environment to at least get indoctrinated to what Linux is. Ubuntu does a really good job of introducing that to folks as well. So those are the two main things that I usually recommend. There are, I don't even know however many out that are out there now, but there's probably a good dozen of them that are the most popular right now. The most complicated of them is probably Gentoo, because you build literally everything from source and everything from scratch. So if you really want to look underneath the hood, hey, I'm a Linux vet, and I want to kind of take my knowledge even a step further. I recommend Gentoo for those folks, because then you really you're not just dealing with a package manager, you're literally compiling everything from source code, and you can really get a good understanding of how the kernel works, and you're taking your knowledge even further. So there, the short of all of this is that there is clearly a wide spectrum of Linux opportunities out there, and installing them are very easy and straightforward. Many of them have ISO images that you can download and install, put on a flash drive, and it's got an interface that can hold you through the whole step from start to finish to get you ultimately up and running. And if you're like me at all, sometimes you just kind of have to learn by doing and learn by breaking, and getting a cheap piece of hardware to load it on, or Raspberry Pi or something along those lines. It was a great opportunity to get your hands wet, hands dirty, and with a pretty low risk, consequence. That worst case scenario, if something breaks, you just re-image it and start back over.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to all of that. I think you touched on a lot of good things, specifically with desktop. This is something that I think, if your main experience with using computers is like just Windows or Mac or something like that, even having the option of like a command line only operating system, like that's not a concept that I think a lot of people are used to. But being honest, that was actually the only way that I ever interacted with Linux for the first couple of years that I used it. So probably like 95+% of the time that I've used Linux, it's just been over command line. I think for a little bit there, I had like my home computer, I could dual boot to Linux just because there were a couple things that I wanted to try out on specifically the desktop setup. But for the most part, I have like just a spare laptop that I had sitting around. I put Proxmox on it, which is like a virtual machine hypervisor. And then using Proxmox, I can spin up or spin down as many different like Linux or various operating system installs that I want to, all in a virtual environment. So it would probably be ambitious to jump straight to Proxmox and then through Proxmox setting up like Ubuntu or Debian or something. But that is, if you just wanted to know, like people that do actually kind of power use Linux, how do they even approach it? Because I think that that's something, if you're just learning through YouTube tutorials or kind of tackling things one project or one hobby project at a time, you can kind of miss out on some of these pretty fundamental things. Like, a lot of, probably I'd be willing to bet that well over 80% of Linux environments are the command line only one and not Linux desktop. That doesn't take away from Linux desktop. I think it's really important to having people feel comfortable using their operating system. So you are right that Linux desktop has come a long way. And there are some really good ones out there, actually, that kind of go out of their way to mimic almost like a Mac-like feel. There's some like Windows-like ones out there. I think just whatever, at the end of the day, whatever you're comfortable with and whatever is going to make you happiest to use is the one that you should go with. But just thought I'd drop a little bit of some of the things that I wish I knew when I was starting out anyway.
Yeah, the Linux is a great gateway to a lot of those other kind of platforms as you start to, because many of those platforms are built on the fundamentals of understanding Linux as well. So case in point, Proxmox is a Debian-based distribution that has been kind of reskinned or retailored to be a primary hypervisor, like you just described. And ultimately, if something does go wrong, and you want to make sure that you understand how Linux works, you don't realize how much it's infiltrated into a lot of the other surfaces that you use. And at the end of the day, understanding Linux, you kind of indirectly start understanding the different fundamentals of how a computer in general works. Um, and we'll kind of like repivot this back to the storage providers is just the mere aspect of installing a hard drive and what is a partition, what is a file system, and those are all things that you more or less end up, and Linux kind of forces you to do a lot of that by hand to a certain extent, whereas Windows takes and kind of strips back a lot of that to because the user doesn't care. They just want it to work, right? But in a Linux environment, because you get those extra the power that comes along with it, you kind of have to go through those stepwise, and so inadvertently you end up learning more about how a computer works, how it interfaces with a hard drive, and then at the end of the day, makes you a better storage provider because you know what it takes in order to get it working in your system. So, or like you mentioned it earlier, when something inevitably ends up going wrong.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a lot of. Sometimes when you learn the most is when, if you set things up for the first time and it was easy, how much have you really learned? A lot of the time you learn more when things go wrong. And that's, I guess, when it can be nice to have that virtual environment. Because if you really screw up an install or something, it's easier to just wipe it and start over some of the time anyway. And it's pretty trivial to do that in a virtual environment. Whereas if it were installed straight to your hard drive on your computer, it'd be a bit of a more involved process to, I guess, wipe the hard drive and install a new disk image kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you get more advanced in this stuff, for me it was obviously working with Linux servers initially, then it transitioned into like dedicated data appliances, which start running different variants of Unix for the most part, which is a discussion for another day. That's different than Linux. And then you start getting into network switches. So everything ends up being interconnected, and a lot of the network switches, if you go with managed, they start being command line interface. So I'm not sharing this with the audience to overwhelm anybody, but I'm just trying to highlight that these are skills that end up overflowing into a lot of the other areas that of running a network, of running a complex environment, that are skills that in general I think would be beneficial as you get into this space. So you will start to see remnants of this in other areas, and because you're already familiar with it, or at least the concepts of how those kind of different computing appliances work, they you end up picking those kind of things up a lot faster. At least that's how it was for me. So yeah, I could go on for a while talking Linux. I don't know. Do people have general questions about Linux? Like, what do you think is like the scariest thing for a lot of folks? Is it just the installing part, and then they're presented with a black and white screen?
Yeah, I want to say that when Linux seems the easiest is when you're just following a direct guide or tutorial. Like if you have a path that you're on, I feel like that's when it's kind of at its easiest because you're being handheld. But once you're kind of done, I don't know, once you're done following the Google or YouTube guide on how to install a certain program or how to do a certain thing, and then you're just kind of left on your own. It's like, well, what do I do now? Or if things start going wrong and I don't even know where to begin debugging or troubleshooting, like why isn't it doing the thing that I expected it to do? Because a lot of things can just quietly break in Linux. That is kind of a thing. So once again, I don't say any of this to discourage people. I think Patrick was exactly on the money when he said that these skills that you develop when you're doing it, it doesn't really even feel like work some of the time. Like it can be kind of fun and it can be interesting to set up like a pie hole blocker kind of thing, or there's all sorts of different ways that you can kind of get into the meat of it that will be fun and not feel like homework essentially. But you'll find other ways to kind of apply it, and I don't know, before you know it, you'll have probably a Synology at home that you have allocated to all sorts of different purposes and have a couple of microservices running on, and it can be kind of fun, and it feels like a hobby, not a job a lot of the time. And I think as long as it stays feeling like that, then it's manageable.
Yeah, the only thing that I should suggest to folks, or I should be caveat all of this is that it can be um once you start learning how to do things, it's some like this is how it was for me. It's kind of hard to stop. Like next thing you know, you've got one server, then you've got two servers. Next thing you know, you've got a cluster of them. And next thing you know, your wife is going, "Hey, we should really insulate that corner of the basement because the servers are getting kind of loud." Um, so,
That was
um,
really
it,
specific.
well, I wasn't sure if that came across or not. It, it there's a lot of other applications that are Docker based too. So even if we go back to that and you're doing stuff surrounding SE Prime and you're running a provider, you're running a relayer, there are other applications that use and leverage Docker as well. I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the team, but that's also one of the fundamental reasons why Docker was chosen because of its general popularity amongst the rest of applications and whatnot that are out there. So it would be relatively easy to deploy other things within your hardware as well, should you so choose. So, but yeah, so that's my 2 cents on Linux. And hopefully you guys enjoy playing with it as much as I do.
Yeah, that was educational. Thanks for coming on, and I'm sure we'll have to hear from you again sometime. Maybe if we get some specific questions from the audience on kind of guidance and like where do I start, or maybe even specific questions regarding Linux.
That
But yeah, thanks for coming on.
I'm always in the Discord, so if anybody has any questions and they can't, and ChatGPT can't answer it, if you know, just feel free to at me.
Cool. No, we have Jordi here. How's it going?
Hey, I don't know. Somebody invited me. Oh,
Well,
here I am.
yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Bag Builder contest? How much time is there left in that contest? Is it just about done?
Something more than a week right now. It ends the coming 25th, so more than a week.
Okay. So
10
about 10
days.
days left. Okay.
Yeah. I just came to the stage to make you repeat my name. So if you want, you can repeat Jordi.
Oh boy. I have to say we took French in school, not Spanish, so I cannot roll my R's.
Sorry, it was a joke.
Jordi.
I don't like coming in public, so I usually get nervous, so I joke.
Ah, no, you're doing fine. I could did you hear me there? Jordi. How was that?
Oh, 9.5.
Ah, thank you. I think
So well, we about the back builder. I we started talking with Andy a couple weeks before the hard fork, if I remember well, and build type competition. It's surprising for me the amount of SAP vote by the players. It's astonishing. It's impressive basically, and I really would like to give thanks to Ian and some of the other investors because they also gave some SPFA for the cause. So thanks to everybody here.
yeah, that is very generous of them. And when I touched on earlier about how how much it's exceeded, I think, my expectations, and I think a lot of other people's. I didn't mean that to suggest or to say that that nobody expected much from the competition, but I think at this point, the fact that it's being close to 1 million coins and about a 50 something million circulating supply means it's close to 2% of the entire supply just over the
Yeah.
last couple of weeks. That's amazing.
To be honest, I myself didn't know what to expect when we started this. It was unknown for us, but well, I thought, well, maybe 500,000, maybe, I don't know. But later it was 1%, and I remember Ryan saying some days ago we have to go for 1 million, and almost there we are. And what what makes this special? It's that everybody is out there in what in well, 10,000 SCP. It's something what 1,000 dollars right now, but it's nothing for the price. It's everybody's there trying to win the biggest prize, and I think next week we will enjoy a lot their movements.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think probably every day or two, I would check in, and yeah, I was just really surprised to see how many people are over 100,000, because I think it is probably not so much a shock that there would be one or two people that go in deep, but yeah, but five people to all be in for, I think at market rates that's over like $10,000 worth. That's really encouraging to see. So huge thank you to you and Andy and Ian and everyone that's helped put this together. Talcom.
Sure. I would like to that at the end of the competition we'll check everything, every single buy. So I encourage everybody to play the best they can, because things could change after the competition ends.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, are there so over the course of this competition and the contest and while it's run, we've had a couple kind of surprise bonuses and surprise announcements. Is there any chance that we might see one more?
Uh, Maybe. um, we have spoken a lot about what to do, what to not to do. But well, we are giving away an insane amount of SPFB, and we don't know. We can't know right now the final amount. So it will depend a little bit on how or when or where the competition ends.
Okay. Yeah, that's thank you for answering that, because I really put you on the spot there. So and I see Andy, who's following along in the chat. He said, "Say yes" when I asked that. So maybe he has something up his sleeve. We'll see.
Well, Andy is it's like the adult here. So if he says yes, it's a yes, but
Okay.
it won't be with my SPFB. Hey.
Okay. His people will talk to your people, okay, and then we'll have an answer. Okay. Well, thank you for coming up on stage. Thank you again for being so active and running that contest. It wouldn't have been possible without you and without several other individuals. So thank you to all of you.
Thanks.
All right, just to recap some of what we discussed today. Today, June 15th, is the last day for the basic to full upgrade, taking advantage of the current promotions and sale that's going on. The remit for that sale is also due by midnight. So just keep an eye on that and send that in if you haven't already. Want to send out kind of a message for providers that the most important thing you could be doing right now is making sure that your storage provider is set up and situated well. Investing in your own skills and having a plan for your provider's future to either scale or add more capacity, or at the very least be able to effectively troubleshoot it if things go wrong. So that means knowing what resources to look for. It means having uptime robot running, all sorts of those things that help you and help us. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want a network of great storage providers that are running well, with people that know how to handle them. We also heard a little bit from one of our partners in a interview preview. So I think before the next storage provider call, you can expect that interview to go up, and probably steer your traffic to that when that's available. We also touched on the bag builder competition that is ongoing for another 10 days. We've all been really wowed with the amounts of SCP that people are putting away in that competition. Especially great that it's community run, it's community led, community through and through. So yeah, really encouraging to see something like that be well run, well organized, and the community be taking up the call and putting away enormous amounts of SCP in their bags. There's also that Gold Shell Twitter giveaway. So 5 HS boxes being given away at Gold Shell Miner on Twitter. I'm sure you can find the link. There's the SCP Funkles show on Saturday, noon Eastern time. They pinky promise that they have a big announcement. I don't know what it is, but those guys are probably telling the truth. They probably have something pretty big, and I'll be tuning in to hear. And then we kind of touched on some of the challenging market conditions that also represent kind of a ray of hope for networks like ours in the current industry. And then kind of closing, we also touched on some of, we heard from Patrick or Psychotics about what it kind of takes to get started in Linux if you're coming in with not a lot of experience, some of what why it's exciting, what it allows for, what's possible. And yeah, just kind of talked shop for a little bit. That will hopefully be interesting to listen to. I know a lot of the things that we touched on are things that I wish I knew when I was starting out. So hopefully we've steered everyone in the right direction there. Anyway, wrapping up this June 15th Storage Provider call. Thanks for coming in, everybody. And I'll fade away into the audience, and I don't know, we'll see what happens. I've never done this before. Thanks for coming.